Hey friends, today we're breaking down some of the best home video setups I have ever come across here online. It looks really nice contrasted against his white shirt. He's not actually perfectly centered in the shot. You can see this back behind him. Look at the line that they showed how they built their slatted wall. If you've ever thought, hey, I wanna make YouTube videos, or man, my video call setup sucks, you'll know just how hard it is sometimes to create a video setup that you're proud of. So that's why today we're gonna be explaining a little bit of what these creators have done to make their video setups look so good. And by the end of the video, it's my hope that you'll learn and take home a couple things to create your own video setup without all the stress and frustration it often takes to do this and figure this out on your own. So this is part of a series we're doing, so check out these prior videos if you haven't already. And I just wanna also call out that all of these creators we're featuring today are amazing, talented folks. So do consider subscribing to their channels and go show them some love and support them, because this is what we're all about, elevating the video creating community. So let's dive into this. So the first creator I wanna highlight here is Mr. Who's the Boss. If you don't know him, he's an amazing creator. I believe he's UK's biggest tech YouTuber. And his content is just so great and he produces so much of it. And so the point I wanted to point out here was that he's designed his studio in a way that allows him to produce a ton of variety.
I don't have a studio. This room that we film everything in, that's actually my bedroom. The bed used to be right here in the middle, but we had to move it to get more space. So now I just sleep in the corner.
So what I mean by that is he's made some very specific design choices to allow him to make use of this limited space he has to create content that feels very fresh and new each time you see it. So for instance, one thing that allows him to do that is this use of these RGB practical lights. Practical lights are what we call lights that show up in the shot. They're not lights that are shining from off camera onto your studio, but rather are the decorations themselves. And he makes use of these really well. He can change the color of these practical lights however he wishes to pair it with whatever content he's creating to keep things interesting. Secondly, he's also able to do a similar effect with his background lighting. These are the lights that shine onto the background that allow him to create sort of the color palette of the wall behind him. So here he's shining blue lights onto the background, and it looks really nice contrasted against his white shirt, as well as blue settings on these practicals on the wall behind him. So here he's created this nice blue effect. If we go to the other shot that we've got here, you can see that he's played around with it a little bit. And I apologize for the screenshots we've captured. It's really hard to get them smiling mid-sentence. But you can see here, he's got the purple and the blue look, and he's done it in a way that balances this out symmetrically. And it's another look that he can play with.
We actually designed like an entire color scheme based on the tone of that video. We make a custom set design with those colors, and then we even make custom text and custom graphics just to match that theme.
Think about if you need variety in your space, think about how you can introduce that with the various props you use, the various decor that you choose to put in your background, so that you can turn your singular space into a whole variety of different sets and studios to play with. And another thing he does really well is he has this desk right here, which, you know, is just a desk. It's not really something that we think about very much, but it allows him to demonstrate a whole bunch of different props and add stuff in front of the camera, and it further allows him to be flexible in his content. So by the way, this is such an important part of the studio design process that I really want to emphasize here. Getting into video making, it seems like all you need to do is find a nice place for your camera. That's what I thought going into YouTube. You know, it's just about filming and showing up on camera. How hard could it be? But once you really get started, you start to realize that there's a lot more to it that you can really optimize if you think about it intentionally. So really think about your workflow and your content needs, what happens behind the scenes, in order to design a studio that helps you to do the heavy lifting on your behalf. So if you need, for instance, a variety of colors right here, like Mr. Who's the Boss, consider RGB lights, for instance, like he's got, or other ways to make your studio more flexible. Or on the other hand, if you need to, say, do interviews, for instance, consider how your studio design helps you to do that. Ultimately, your studio is a tool designed around what needs you specifically have as a content creator, given your process, your mindset, and your workflow. So think about how you can creatively use your space for maximum utility given those specific needs and priorities. I really like to tell people that building a studio is about building an asset for yourself and not a liability, right? Building a liability means having this entire setup process that looks great, but you have to spend 4 hours setting it up and getting it right and tweaking it every single time before you can turn the camera on and start filming. That becomes a liability that really gets in the way of creating content, right? But on the other hand, if you can design your studio well and have it work with your workflow, you can get it to a point where you click the camera on and it's ready to film within 60 seconds. All right, next, this is E, or should I say this is E. He is another awesome YouTuber that I actually just kind of randomly stumbled across, and I was very impressed at the videos that he made. And his studios here are just incredible. And this one in particular I wanted to point out. So the thing I love the most actually about this shot is that he's breaking norms in different ways that I wanted to call some attention to. The other thing that you can see here is that he's not actually perfectly centered in the shot. He's a little bit off to the right here. And while I recommend most people center themselves and also shoot against a flat wall, because it tends to be just a really nice default look, he pulls this off very well, breaking these norms. And one thing that he's done in order to make this work is he's made use of these leading lines. So the purpose of having yourself centered is for the person watching to immediately snap their eyes to your face, right? But on the other hand, This Is E has been able to do this in a way that is using these leading lines right here. He's got a bunch of lines in his shot that point the viewer's eyes back to his face, as a way to let you know that you can try things and do things that aren't the typical norm. And if you know what you're doing, they can work out pretty well. So don't be afraid to play around, experiment, and don't just take norms for granted just because you see your favorite YouTubers doing it. You can really make almost anything work if you know what you're doing. Next, we have Tyler Stallman, who has honestly one of the coolest studio spaces I've ever seen. He's a creator in the filmmaking space, and it definitely shows that he knows what he's doing. So probably the best thing that Tyler does here with his space is he understands the selling point of his physical space, the physical filming location that he's in. He understands what makes it so awesome. And here it's the spaciousness, right? You can see that he's got this awesome depth behind him, this awesome space. You can see the top of this loft over here. You can see this back behind him. So he's got a lot of depth and interesting nooks and crannies to his space. And because of that, he was able to take advantage of his filming style and using the various tools like his lenses and layout and where he placed the camera to fully capture and emphasize the strength that he has here, which is the spaciousness. So to do this, for instance, he makes use of a wide lens. He specifically chose a wide lens here so that you could really see as much as you can to the sides and around him. And using wide lenses like this allow you to expand the amount of space that you can perceive through the screen. You can think of this as sort of like the fisheye effect that you used to see in 90s music videos. You're able to see a lot wider. Or like imagine looking through someone's door peephole thing, you can really see around, right? And that's sort of the effect that these wider lenses give you. So you can also think about all the real estate photos you've ever seen. They try to make houses look big and spacious and welcoming, and they're almost all exclusively shot with wider lenses. So don't overlook how powerful your different lens choices and little tiny gear choices can have on your finished product. So that's that, the wide lenses. I think that was a genius move here. But also what Tyler's done is I believe he's pushed his table all the way to the very far side of his room. So imagine here, right here on the very end of where he's looking at, I believe that's almost the wall. So keep in mind, the person watching your video is not gonna know what's behind the camera. They're only gonna see what the camera sees. So for you, think about where in your space you're putting your camera. Try to push it as far against the far wall as possible, so most of that space in your filming location is used on screen rather than, pushed behind the camera where no one can see it and it doesn't make a big difference. So by doing this, by putting all this space on camera rather than off camera, he's again emphasizing the spaciousness of his filming location. So consider these two things, your lenses. Choose how spacious you want your space to feel and how much distance you want to have between you, your camera, and the background. It's gonna make a huge difference. This is what I love about what Tyler's done, and if you are thinking about how to do something similar in your space, you don't need a super spacious, beautiful, pre-designed place to do this. Think about what makes your space different, what makes your space unique, and try to emphasize those with the gear and the different techniques you decide to use. This right here, our next creator, is none other than the legendary Peter McKinnon. If you watched any camera-related content on YouTube in the last few years, you've almost definitely seen one of his videos recommended to you. Now, this guy has a special place in my heart because he was one of the creators who inspired me a few years back to quit my job here in Silicon Valley to pursue building a channel of my own full-time, and whom I owe a lot of this life trajectory to in the first place. So Pete, if you're watching this, thank you, man. And so I thought it'd be fitting to include him as an example here for studios that we can learn from, because he is also a master at the craft. So this right here is just one of the many studios that Peter films in over the years, but this is recently one that he's been using a lot more because he's designed his office space to make this part of his workflow. So one thing that I like that he does very, very well, amongst a lot of things, is that he makes extremely effective use of leading lines. And I mentioned this before, but I think here, this shot does it so well, more than many other creators I've seen. And as a photographer who composes shots for a living, I believe that he probably did this very intentionally. So like I said, I briefly mentioned leading lines before, but leading lines, to explain them a little bit, they're simply lines that you can find in your shot composition if you look at the lines that naturally appear in the space. And they're these lines that your eye naturally follows and gets sucked into to bring your viewer's attention towards where you want it to go. So this is especially useful in our digital age, right, where everyone's attention is so scattered. Most people, when they click on a video to start watching, they're already thinking about whether they want to leave this video or looking around at different parts on the page. And so this is so important to hold that viewer's attention when algorithms on YouTube and elsewhere are driven by watch time. If you can keep a viewer watching for a little bit longer, your videos are going to do a lot better in the algorithm and be recommended to more and more people. And so with leading lines, you have this power to bring back the viewer's attention by making use of these sort of like train tracks that take your viewer's eye. So let's just say I'm looking at Pete over here, and then my eye sort of bounces over here to look at the paintings, right? But then my eye gets sucked back in through this line and comes back to Peter. So as you're designing your own studio, think about how you can make use of leading lines to bring that viewer's eye and attention back to you anytime their attention starts to wander. So again, you can do this in many different ways, and now is a chance to really get creative with it. All right, now we've got Becky and Chris. These, again, are two of my favorite YouTubers. Honestly, a lot of these YouTubers are my favorite. They're all my favorite YouTubers. And they're huge inspirations of mine too, personally. Can you kind of tell that I got a lot of my ideas and inspirations from them? I really like the dark look and the dark background that they've got going, and they exemplify it so well. So that's really one of the best things that they do here, me speaking personally. I really like how they have this dark background and this bold use of their color palette. It's like the dark darks against the light lights, and it really works really well with their super refined sense of interior design. They don't just try to do a little bit of design, right, and just push it just a tiny bit with their space, but they really lean into it. They pick a color palette, they pick a choice of style of interior design, and they really commit to it. If you look at these very nice dark themes and decorations, you can tell they didn't just randomly grab things at the store or around their house to throw into the background. Actually, maybe they did grab random stuff around their house, because their whole house, if you've seen their vlogs, are really, really well designed with a coherent style and theme. But for most of us, for the rest of us like me who don't have the perfect house with the perfect furniture matching everything, it's a chance to really think about, how do you want your studio to look? What stuff do you want to put in the background? And think about going with some kind of a feeling, some kind of a theme to tie everything together. And don't just go a little bit, like really commit to it. Every single piece of furniture or design that you add to the background of your studio impacts how your viewer feels about you and your content. Even the wall decorations, Becky and Chris did an amazing job here. They have a video where they showed how they built their slatted wall. They really went all out with this. They built texture into the wall itself, and even that little touch really shows. So really get nerdy with this part of the process. It's so much fun here too. Don't be afraid to commit to what you like and go all the way with it. putting in that extra mile of, say, painting your wall a different color or picking a specific color scheme and sticking with it, it'll honestly make such a big difference in your content. When people see that little bit of intentionality, they assume so many things, so many good attributes about you as a creator, that you have put together content, that your message is something that's going to be crafted and ready for them to digest. And people just tend to gravitate towards studios that they see that intentionality in. So this is your permission, if you need permission, to really go nuts and go all the way and really express yourself through the space that you're building here. All right, this right here, last but not least, this is yet another of my favorite YouTubers in the camera space. I guess we had a ton of camera folks in this video. And by the way, check out the other video that we did if you want to see some other folks. This is going to become a series that we do here. So Caleb is one of the internet's geniuses when it comes to setting up a studio space. He's got all sorts of amazing ideas and recommendations on the topic. So if you haven't seen his stuff yet, definitely go check out his channel. I've personally learned so much from the stuff he's put out. Caleb, if you're watching this, thank you, man. You are awesome. This right here is one of my favorite shots of his because of his use of light projection and shadows. You can see right here on the wall that beautiful projected light and shadow pattern. This right here too, as well as this part up here shining from this lamp. So much intricate detail and texture just using light and shadow. So I believe this studio right here, this shot, it takes place in his studio space without any natural daylight. So all of this is done with artificial lighting, if you can believe it or not. But he's used all these great techniques to create the illusion of an entire world happening off camera. So for instance, this light over here feels like moonlight or light streaming in from a window on this side of the screen. And this one over here kind of feels the same way. It feels like light coming in from another light source shining in from this angle here. And it feels like, again, moonlight or some very cinematic lighting technique. And they also cast this beautiful light and shadow across all the stuff he has in his backgrounds. You can see right here, these C-stands normally would just kind of be standing there, but now they look really nice and very intentional because of the way the light reflects and wraps around them from this light projection he's got going on. And by doing so, you can see here he's taken such a simple, sparse background and made it feel very rich simply by using light and shadow to create this texture. And by the way, fun fact, I believe he used mirrors actually to achieve this look right here on the wall. You can check out this video here where he explains how he does this. This video absolutely blew my mind. But you can also accomplish a similar effect in other ways too that are thankfully much less difficult and much less do-it-yourself if you're not super inclined to do that. Namely, one thing you can do is shine a spotlight through some objects like trees, like I've done here in my background. If you can kind of see here, there's a pattern of leaves and stuff on the wall, right? Because I have a light over here shining onto the wall through those leaves. You can also use projection attachments and what are called gobos, little almost cookie cutter things you can put in front of these projection attachments to cast whatever shape you want onto the wall behind you. And if you're curious about this magical thing called the gobo, check out this video here by my friend Heather over at Fellow Filmmaker, where she explains how to use them. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something and got some tips that you can take to immediately help you design a better studio for yourself. But I know how frustrating and difficult this process is, especially if you're sort of new to this process. So if you're curious to see a more in-depth breakdown of the step-by-step principles that I use to guide students to build their own studio at home or in their office, I have an in-depth longer video for you on that. It is a little bit long for YouTube, so I've put that on our website. You can find the link to that down below on the Dream Studio course website. Otherwise, you can check out one of these other videos here on YouTube where we break down some more of these studios and give you more tips and tricks to build your own studio at home. So I'll see you in one of those places, but regardless, I'll see you in a couple seconds, and much love, my friends. I'll see you in a bit.